Chris Avina with American Outdoor News. I'm here with Chris Tymeson. He's the Safari Club International Vice President of Government Affairs. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Now, you cover such a vast ground as VP of Government Affairs, starting with advocacy, correct?
Right. So government affairs is advocacy, right? That's what I do. That's my business. And we have I like to think of SCI's advocacy in 6 buckets, essentially. I've got federal affairs, state affairs, international advocacy. We've got Hunter Information Service, which is Barbara Crown helps our members, and she identifies issues that our members bring, and then she brings those to our advocacy team. Got a guide and outfitter liaison that we supervise. He works with guide and outfitter associations all around the world. And then I've got legal. So we have a litigation team, and so we pack a big punch.
So what is SCI doing for hunters and outdoorsmen as we speak?
Well, I mean, we've got, I guess that's a very broad question, right? So
it is.
Let's
say as far as advocacy.
Right. So let's just, we bring all of those resources to bear. So what is advocacy, right? It's going out and talking to legislators. So we have folks, I used to be the Western state and local liaison. That's where I first started with SCI. Before that, I was the chief attorney for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks for 22 years. And so that's where I learned all of my advocacy skill set, really. And I was in the service before that and had worked at the Department of Revenue and some other things. But really where I learned conservation law and policy was when I was the agency attorney. And so as the Western state and local liaison, I would wake up every day, come down, I read my email, so I work out of my house, and then I'm on the road about 15 days a month, every month, 15 days, weekends, going out and meeting with folks. So as the Western person, I would scour the internet every day, see what issues are out there, see what's popping up, and my day might start something completely different and end on the next emergency or the next fire. But go out and meet with legislators in those states, go out and meet with department officials. And that's where, when I came to SCI, I brought those relationships that I had on a national level with my peers and state wildlife directors. And so I go to a couple meetings a year that are called the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency meeting. There's a legal committee, and the directors all come, and biologists, staff, and they meet twice a year. And then there's some regional associations. I go to those meetings and maintain those relationships and work on our issues that are pertinent to SCI members. Go ahead.
And that is everything from endangered species to Sunday hunts and it goes on and on.
It goes on and on. Travel with firearms, predators take a lot of my time. On the federal level, we talked about endangered species. There's trophy import bans. There's all sorts of things that we work on every day. Access for hunters. Yeah. When we think about access is physical, and there's other ways to restrict access, like ammunition. Like if you said you could only have non-lead ammunition in rifles, that's a way to restrict access. Or it's not just the limited draw permits or changing where you can hunt or the types of weapons that you can hunt. So there's lots of different things that we work on a daily basis. It's actually a little mind-blowing to think about what SCI does, right?
Is the hunting on, say, state or federal land, there's a big difference between preservation versus conservation.
Right. Conservation for sure is sustainable use. SCI stands for the freedom to hunt for all hunters. Doesn't matter what you hunt, where you hunt, how you hunt. We represent all hunters. And then sustainable use conservation. We believe in wise use of our natural resources, not preservation. You know, there are some places where, you know, you might argue that preservation is necessary when you have an endangered species that's down to its last remaining members of the species. But as those species expand and rebound, then, you know, you have interaction with humans, whether it's positive or negative. Like, I'll give you an example because I'm thinking about it. Cranes, sandhill cranes, right?
Yeah.
There's whooping cranes that travel with sandhill cranes. And so sandhill cranes population's 500,000 in the mid-continent population. They come through Kansas. That's where I live. I go west usually every year, and I hunt cranes with a group of guys that I've hunted with for 20 years. But there's whooping cranes. We'll never hunt whooping cranes, but there's conflicts because they run into power lines, and there's all sorts of ways that they could end up getting killed. Hunting is not one of them, but it's an impact on hunters because then if you have whoopers, you have to shut down your hunting, you know, stuff like that. Or as grizzly bears, the population expands. You know, once they were few, now they're many, and they're recovered in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And there's conflicts with hunters, and we should be hunting them, but you know, there are litigants out there who've made it their business to sue and settle on the government and prevent those species from being hunted. So SCI is out advocating for all those hunters and those opportunities.
Well, how has, taking a giant step back here, how has the government shutdown affected outdoorsmen and hunters?
Sure. You know, SCI has advocated for a clean continuing resolution. There seems to be one moving today. Actually, I think the House is going to vote on it.
Yes.
We thought that was the best path forward. It's basically an extension through January 30th. So there were folks in the Democratic Party who wanted to basically shut the government down over some subsidies for health care. Obviously, the Republicans didn't want that and advocated for the clean CR. You know, that's politics that I don't necessarily engage in. The politics I engage in are what's best for hunters, and what was best for hunters was a continuation of the government as it was. It puts people back in the field. So we've worked with the Department of Interior and in particular the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to ensure that properties stayed open. So we're very appreciative of the folks at Interior and in the service who did keep those properties open. We had a couple of instances where we heard from some hunters about, like, there was a hunt of a lifetime type deal, and they weren't going to open up the property for this individual, young child who's terminally ill, and because they didn't have coverage, and we reached out to Interior, and they opened that property up. So the folks at Interior have been very accommodating. Certainly, there are issues associated with, let's say, visas and coming to the Safari Club convention. And so folks are not getting visas processed. That's tangential to actually hunting, but it's important to our business and hunters to make sure that those people can come and go to our show, and to outfitters. And so there've been a few hiccups with it, but it looks like government's going to open back up, and you know, we'll roll from there for the least. Yeah.
Well, that should fade away in theory.
Hopefully. Yeah. I mean, until we come up on the next deadline, right? And then Congress passes yet another extension, let's hope, or the actual funding bills.
Yeah, you had mentioned something about the Big Beautiful Bill and public land access fight.
Sure. As the Big Beautiful Bill was passing this summer, right? It passed and was signed, I think, July 3rd. There was an attempt to limit or to have sales of public land, you know, wholesale sales of public land. And SCI opposed that provision to sell off those public lands. First off, they aren't making more of it, right? We all know that there's a limited amount of land.
Yep.
But there are places and times that it's appropriate to sell public lands. There are processes currently in place to sell public lands if it involves public input. And, you know, our consideration is what's the impact to hunters. Like when I worked for the state, there were some examples where we shouldn't have owned a piece of property, but it was a gift. and it came through somebody's will, and it was given to us. And I can think of one specific example, which was a couple residential lots. The agency had to pay taxes on it because we paid tax on public lands that we owned, purchased after 1990, I think, or owned after 1990. And then we tried to do something with it and put a kiosk in, and the county said no, and then they charged us for a sewer line, and why should hunters pay for a sewer line in a place that they can't use for public access, hunters and anglers? And so that was an example of a piece of property that never should have been in public ownership.
Yeah.
But the process for selling off public lands should not have been in the Big Beautiful Bill. And so there were a number of folks who opposed it. It wasn't just SCI. But we said, this isn't the appropriate place to have this conversation. If you want to have this conversation, use one of the processes that's currently in place and let hunters engage, because they were not engaging in this in the Big Beautiful Bill process.
Well, I think when any bill is written, there's going to be some sort of collateral damage that wasn't taken into account when they were writing the bill.
Right.
And that's where you come in, fighting to make amendments within that bill. Right.
We do engage in that process, and we use a thing we call it a HAC. It's a Hunter Advocacy Action Center. And we'll send out alerts to folks and ask them to grassroots send in their comments on bills or on regulations. We can target it to a specific state, or we can target it to like a committee. But that's how we get our grassroots support to those legislators. And, if everybody sends the same letter, that's fine. That just lets those legislators know, hey, we got 1,000 members or 10,000 members or 50,000 members who are interested in this issue, right?
Yeah.
I would prefer that they customize it a little bit so it just doesn't look like a form letter. But what I'm more interested in is making sure that our members reach out and touch those members of Congress or those members of state legislature. And actually, I think a call is worth 10 times any email, right? Or 100 times any email, because an individual who picks up a phone and calls is taking that time and they want to speak to somebody. And I think that's very effective for constituents to get their point across.
Now, with what you do in the advocacy world, I'm sure there's a lot of crossover with other major organizations that, like the NRA or things of that nature, where the suppressor tax,
yes,
which is going away shortly. Did you jointly fight that with the NRA or Second Amendment Foundation, one of those organizations?
NRA is a great partner. In fact, I got a text from John Comerford last night. He's a good friend of mine. He used to actually work in Kansas, and he leads their legislative efforts and their advocacy efforts. And yes, we worked on that issue. Certainly, we have a lot of members who, well, okay, let's put it this way. Second Amendment stuff is not necessarily right in my wheelhouse, but it is, because if it impacts hunters. And I'll give you a good example. And you see this cookie-cutter language in the states. And it's no center fire long guns for 18 to 21-year-olds. And what does that mean? That means they're targeting black guns, they're targeting AR platforms. And so how does that impact hunters? Well, hunters use those guns, number one.
Yep.
And number two, they're not just targeting those AR platforms, they're hitting shotguns. So like an 18-year-old kid who wants to buy a shotgun to go duck hunt isn't going to be able to buy a long gun because it's a center fire.
Yeah.
And so we fight those issues every day in the states. And I have the perspective of seeing legislation on a national basis that it's a pattern. You'll see it pop up in Washington. Next thing you know, it's in Colorado, and the next thing you know, then California, right? So you see those patterns show up, and you figure out a way to fight those, and then they come back the next year with a slightly different version that addresses some of your points. But so 2A stuff is in our wheelhouse, but it's not directly in the wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Suppressors, yeah, certainly we worked on that issue as it went through the big beautiful bill. Encouraged our members to contact members of Congress and support that provision. And then, I've hunted with a lot of suppressors. I own some suppressors. They're very valuable, and mostly for my own hearing. Having been in the infantry in the Army and not used earplugs in war, I know, or sometimes in live fire training, I know the damage that can be caused from not wearing proper ear protection. But with a suppressor, it helps reduce that noise level down.
Yeah.
It helps protect the shooter.
Tinnitus and beyond.
Oh, yeah. My ears ring every day. That's just the way it is for me.
Yeah. And I would imagine most hunters probably have it as well.
Right. So anyway, January 1st, that suppressor tax goes away. There are some companies out there like Silencer Central waiving the tax right now. I anticipate January 1, there's going to be a lot of people who they're waiting to save that $200, and so there's going to be a lot of purchases come January 1. So if you can find a company that's willing to waive the $200 tax stamp or pay for it themselves, that's how they're doing it. Essentially, they're paying for that tax stamp themselves, and I would encourage folks to go ahead and go on. I will say also the ATF, has reduced wait times on suppressors significantly by process improvement. I think the first one I waited for 14 months, and then it was 8 months, and then it was 4 months, and then it was 2 weeks. It's down to a quick turnaround. And so I guess I would encourage folks to go ahead and find a company and do that before January 1.
Well,
avoid that glut of people.
Now, I know you started to discuss a couple minutes ago about predators and different animals that you're fighting for the advocacy, and just the Florida bear hunt is something that just jumps out at you.
Right.
It's a first in God knows how long, and long overdue.
Right. So in Florida, I think there are 300 bears killed annually just in vehicle strikes, and they've got the largest population of bears in the U.S. that doesn't have a hunting season.
Yeah.
So that should tell you something. I think so I have, one of my coworkers, B. Frederick, actually has Florida as his state, and he manages that issue. But that's an example of where SCI brings a lot of its assets to bear. So we have a foundation, and the foundation side has education, conservation, and we have a carnivore expert, Maria Davidson, who used to be the black bear biologist for Louisiana. And we can talk about Louisiana too here as another example. But so she's working on the education side, and then B goes and he testifies and helps support the grassroots efforts, gets the chapter folks of SCI to come, and they testify at the commission level on the regulations. And so the commission then passed the hunting season. It's supposed to take effect in December this year, and there are folks who don't want to have hunting of bears in Florida. It's controversial for them, and they're ignoring the science, obviously. But they filed a lawsuit and a temporary restraining order to try to stop the bear hunt. And then our legal team has jumped in, and now we filed to intervene in that lawsuit. So, in fact, we had every day we do a stand-up on our team. I've got people in South Africa. I've got 2 in Europe. I've got 1 in Canada on an international front. I've got people spread across the United States. And so we do a daily stand-up. And for the people on other continents, it's the end of their day. We do our start. And so that was one of the topics of conversation this morning was we haven't heard anything back for a ruling on that temporary restraining order. So
well, it's funny how they don't follow the science when it goes against what they want.
Right. Follow the science. Right. And that's when I worked at the agency. It was always let's go with the science and we'll stick with the science. And then there are social impacts. Never forget the politics of wildlife management. Politics are local,
Yeah.
and so you still have to pay attention to the social aspects of it, but let the science be your guide, right?
Well, it's funny that, they're only proving what, 167 bear permits in
Yeah, it's a
Florida?
low number. I think it was like 174, and then I don't remember. There was like 192 initially, and now it's 174. It's a very conservative number, right, on the
Extremely
population.
conservative. It's not even going to put a dent in the population, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Right, it's a start. And if you look at Louisiana, for example, it's the same. It's a similar scenario. They have about 1,200 bears, so their population is about a fourth, maybe, or a third of what Florida has.
Yeah.
And they started last year with that's another example of where SCI used all of its resources. And uh, our legal team, Regina Lennox, she defended the bear delisting twice in federal court. So there was a delisting action by the feds. She helped defend that twice. I advocated at the legislature and worked with folks there. Our chapter people helped support that, did grassroots efforts. Maria Davidson on our foundation side, we actually ran a bear education class for the hunters, but they started with 10 permits,
Uh-huh.
right? Their first season. This is going into their second season. There's 25 permits plus one auction permit to help raise money. So they've expanded it a little bit. Obviously, hunters care about wildlife just as much as any other person. And we want to see wildlife flourish. So we're
Sure.
not going to shoot, the antis always say, oh, they're just going to indiscriminately shoot. No, this is a very conservative scenario, low numbers of permits. As a
Yeah.
hunter, I want to see bears, but I also want to
Sure.
see them managed. I want to see them managed properly. Sustainable use. That's what we believe in.
Sure. Me being in New York, I hunted for a long time and I've never seen a bear in the woods. And then I moved my hunting location to a different area and I'm seeing bears like every time I'm out in the field. It's, now they're like all over. Their population exploded in New York.
Hmm. Which is good and bad, right? We want to see wildlife flourish,
Yeah.
but we want to manage it within societal limits. There are that's one thing I learned about when I worked at the state. Like, I love deer and I love to have lots of deer, but if you're a landowner and you farm, you might not like the same level of deer that I like. Or if you're driving
Yeah.
in an area that has high deer densities, you might not like the same level. So there's that societal pressure to ensure that things don't go too far askew. Like
Well,
the idea that we wouldn't manage wildlife, like some of these anti-hunting folks, like we should have no hunting. Well, guess what? Deer populations would double. We've
yeah.
got 30 million whitetails in this country. We're going to have 60 million whitetails if we couldn't hunt them, right? And then you have scenarios where they would, they would be starving, obviously, because
Hmm.
there's just not enough food. So you have to manage these animals.
Well, where I am on Long Island is a prime example of that. Uh, when I was growing up, deer you would only see out on the East End, uh, farming area. But then as time went on and the deer population grew, and we were the only predators at that time, there were really no coyote here. The population exploded and they started moving further and further west to find food, and now they're everywhere.
Right. We have here in Kansas City. I live on the Kansas side, and when I worked for the agency, we had an issue with a park, and essentially it's surrounded by housing subdivisions. Right, it's a 1 by 2 mile park. It's a big park. It's got a lake, but you can drive in there and you can see the browse line. Like the deer have eaten everything that they can eat. And so it got to the point where they were going into neighborhoods and causing deer vehicle accidents and things like that. And so the agency had to authorize the county to then hire sharpshooters and tried to do it with hunting.
Yeah.
But when you have that dense of a population. It wasn't making a big enough impact. And so,
Same here.
right. And so they hired a group that came in 2 nights and shot over 350 deer in that little pocket, right? And it helped reduce the population, but it's going to come back the same. We're going to have the same problem because there's nowhere for those populations to expand and they're not hunted. So what you do is you should run a program where you reduce the population and then run a maintenance program with hunting on top of it, right?
Yeah. Well, they extended our season here on Long Island through January. It's not enough. It's really
Right.
not enough. The population has just exploded, and there's way too many. And even, we have people that are taking 10, 15 deer a year. It's still not enough.
That's a lot of deer for one person, for sure.
It is. Well, a lot of it
Right.
gets donated to food banks and the like. So
Right.
they're performing a service and, culling the herd at the same time.
Well, back on the predators. So SCI does a fair amount of carnivore predator management, right?
Hmm.
We just talked about bears, but mountain lions. I spent a whole portion of my life last year on Colorado mountain lions working that issue. There was a ballot measure to ban hunting and trapping of mountain lions
Yes.
and bobcats and lynx. And lynx was a red herring, but because they're federally protected, so you can't do those things anyway with a lynx. But you put it on the ballot and it makes people
Throw
feel
it
fuzzy.
in, and it
Right.
throws a little more legitimacy on their end.
Right. Try. So I spent a lot of time last year, and SCI spent a lot of money along with some other partners in the industry, and we helped defeat that measure. Uh, SCI does a lot of wolf work, right,
Hmm.
on the national level, delisting of wolves, and SCI has been involved in litigation for 20 years on wolves. So our folks have a lot of experience there. Coyotes, we work up. You mentioned coyotes, which is what made me think about bringing this back up.
Sure.
You know, coyote contests are controversial. There's something going on in Nevada right now, which would require folks to get a hunting license if they're going to be in a coyote contest and have a time frame that they couldn't harvest coyotes. Previously, it was wide open. So, I think that predator hunting and carnivore hunting, bears, mountain lions, wolves, all of that, bobcats, is ground zero for the fight for hunting right now.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Now, what about, and this is getting into a whole different area, polar bears. You could hunt them, you can't bring the pelt back.
Right. Again, it's sustainable use, and so they're listed as a threatened species under the Federal Endangered Species Act. There is no provision to hunt them and bring them to import those trophies back into the U.S. Hunting still goes on. I saw an ad the other day for a hunt, and those communities that rely on hunters' dollars, right? Uh, they So if they have a polar bear and permits, they bring in a hunter. A hunter spends $50,000 or whatever the number is to
It's
hunt.
a big number.
Yeah, it's big money. It's big dollars. It's expensive to get up there, but then those communities reap the benefit. You know, I like to use this line. I think it's very colonial of the United States to tell other countries how to manage their wildlife through our Endangered Species Act.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Like we tell, South Africans, when I say South Africans, I mean Southern African countries, how to manage their wildlife because we have a permit system that will allow or not allow those animals to be hunted and those trophies to be brought back into the United States. I mean, I don't live with elephants. I don't know what it's like to have an elephant come in and destroy my entire crop in one night
In the night. Yeah.
for the whole year. My entire earnings for a year in one night gone. So I was in Africa last year with my wife, and we hunted in South Africa, and then we went up to Zambia and Zimbabwe and Botswana and did a little touring afterwards. And I had a guy who was driving us over to Botswana so we could go to Chobe National Park, and we're talking to him, and I said, "Do you like being a tour guide?" And he's a young guy, Manguela, and super nice. Had a great time with him. And he's like, "No, actually, I want to be a farmer." And I was like, "Well, then why aren't you farming?" He said, "I tried 3 years in a row. I had a cabbage crop of 15,000 head of cabbage.
Wow.
And in one night, a herd of elephants, when the rain stops, the elephants come in and they just destroy my crop. I can't make a living."
Yeah.
So I changed to tourism. So it's very colonial of us to tell the Canadians or some other country, Africans,
Yeah.
how to manage their wildlife to our standard because we know what's best.
Well, it's not like you're going to put up a fence and keep out an elephant, you know?
Right, right.
But
So,
yeah, I don't disagree with that in the least. I've been to Africa myself, and I know you can't keep out an elephant, and they can
right,
destroy a livelihood in hours.
right. There are some. Speaking of polar bears, I have a call this week. There are some folks who legally hunted polar bears before they were listed as threatened species, and there was no provision for them to bring their trophies back into the U.S. and the pelts and the skulls, and so they're still sitting in Canada. I think there's about 70 or 80. I'm not sure the exact number, but trying to get a bill passed to help those folks bring those back in. Somebody lawfully did something, and then they're caught in a snafu in the law, which didn't allow them to import those legally taken trophies. So continuing to work on polar bears, amongst other things.
So always something. I know you said you get involved in gun legislation also. I know, uh, being a New Yorker, New York's always at the forefront of that, as well as California, Colorado, surprisingly Maryland. Um, what kind of headway are we making on that?
So every year there's a bill in New York uh, that deals with lead ammunition, right?
Yeah,
And
that's a
same
big
with
one too.
Maryland as well. California excise taxes. California has gun legislation every year. It's the craziest of the gun legislation states. Colorado followed the excise tax model, so the idea that, Pittman Robertson money, those excise taxes, hunters pay those. It's
Sure.
actually paid at the factory, but it's built into the cost. The hunters have, pay that. That money goes to the federal government. It's apportioned back to the states based on geographic size and the number of licensed buyers, and there's minimum percentages. And so when you talk about excise tax, that's what I think of. Now, California, New York, Colorado have come up with this idea of, well, let's put our own excise tax on it and tax people out of gun ownership. And they take that money and they use it for mental health. That's what the money is directed for. Our money that goes back to the states goes to those hunting agencies, and they purchase land or they manage wildlife or
Conservation
conserve
efforts.
wildlife. Right. There's like all sorts of things that money does, but it's funding conservation, not mental health issues.
Sure.
And I guess my response is, if you want to fund mental health issues, everybody should be paying for that, right?
Yeah.
It should be a general tax, not just a tax on hunters. But they say it's for gun violence also, to prevent gun violence. That's another one. Like,
You know
well,
what?
again, hunters are not the ones committing gun violence. Those are illegal people doing bad things already.
There's
So
enough gun laws on the books. Another one isn't going to make a difference.
no, it's not.
It's about imposing what you have. The ammunition bans, uh, that's lead versus steel shot or things of that nature. It's just making it more expensive for a hunter to buy ammo.
Right, right. I mean, there's all sorts of gimmicks to try to, and you can say what you want to say. They say what they want to say, but the reality is they just want to tax guns out of existence. I don't think they'd feel the same way if we started taxing their right to vote, things like that, a
Yeah,
constitutional right, you know. So we'll see where this goes. There's some litigation that's going on now on those excise tax issues. And, we get a few wins here and there.
You had also mentioned there's a few things going on, what you call it, ballot box biology.
Right, ballot box biology, that's for sure.
In Oregon and Colorado.
Yeah, so Colorado seems to be ground zero also for a lot of fights in the wildlife arena right now. IP98, it's an alternative wildlife commission. So there are people who don't like the current wildlife commission, and so they're going to come up with their alternative wildlife commission that basically is a preservation commission rather than hunting. And so that's out there. They're trying to gather signatures for that. We talked about the ballot box issue with mountain lions that I worked on last year, and then Oregon IP3. So you have some of these western states that have very liberal rules when it comes to these ballot initiatives and getting them on the ballot. IP3, it would ban hunting, fishing, animal agriculture, even rodents, like trapping a rodent in your house. It would prevent you from killing a rodent in your house. You have mice or rats.
No, so we gotta coexist with mice and rats.
Right. So it is the craziest thing. It started off, and I've worked on it for about 4 years. I came in, did some legal work on it for SCI, and then it's continued to come back in different forms because they can't get the total amount of signatures necessary to get it on the ballot, which is like 124,000. So what's happening is they come back. So they introduced the first one. We made legal comments. They changed and they doubled down. We were like, you realize this wouldn't allow you to kill a mouse in your house. And they wrote that in. Like, it's crazy what level they're at.
That's insane.
What's even crazier is they've got 61,000 signatures. 61,000. 61,000 people think that's okay.
Well, at some point in your home ownership, you're going to see a mouse in your house. It's going to happen. Do you want to let them breed and expand in your house? God bless you. Knock yourself out. Not for me.
Not for me. Not for me either. So for sure. But that's some of the crazy stuff that's out there that we're working on that people don't see. Like, we're fighting that before it gets to the ballot, before it gets crazy. So
I want to take a step back on the Colorado one, the preservation versus conservation. Can you define the difference between, for our audience? People think, oh, they're preserving that land. Preservation's good. It's really not.
No, active management of all is always necessary, right? I mean, just look at your yard. Do you like to have it mowed, or do you think, it should be unkept? Look at the bushes in the back. You trim them up every year, or you think, it looks like a tree is going to fall on your house. You just let it fall on your house? No, you got to actively manage it, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's land or wildlife, it still requires active management. In the prairies where I live, eastern red cedar is an invasive, and it takes over, and it ruins the prairie, right? So you have to go in and actively remove those trees.
Yeah.
Sustainable use, right? If you want that prairie to exist, you got to actively manage it and make it sustainable. And it's the same with wildlife. You can't have too many deer. Like, if you just didn't kill deer, you'd double your deer population. So preservation versus conservation. There it goes. One is no management or little management, active, and then the other one is sustainable use. Conservation is sustainable use.
So preservation is like, okay, we're going to rope off this park to preserve the land. You can't use it, but it's a park. Where if we're going to do conservation on this park over here, you're going to be able to actively use that park and maintain it and make it usable for you and me and whoever. But the other one is going to sit dormant, and they're going to let it get overgrown and you can't touch it.
Right.
But they're preserving it for you.
Right. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Active management is the key. It's just like forests. You have to actively manage forests. Mm-hmm. You got to go in, harvest some trees, make some room for other trees to come back, help that ecosystem flourish.
Cull out the lands, open it up a little bit, so you have some nice shooting lanes.
Right. There are lots of ways to manage property.
Oh man. Well, we covered quite a bit today, and there's still more that we haven't covered, but I'd like to have you back on another episode and go over the rest of what you do, because I don't think the average person really grasps what's involved in what the Government Affairs Division does for hunters.
We're very busy. We have a weekly report that I submit up to my management, and it's long. I'm very proud of our people. We have the best government affairs shop in the business, and we're out advocating for hunters every day. Doesn't matter what you hunt, where you hunt, how you hunt. SCI's first for all hunters. We've got a convention coming up too in February, and we put on a bunch of stuff there as an advocacy team. And so we have like a couple continuing legal education classes for lawyers who are interested in wildlife law or gun law. We do one of those. We have a government affairs committee. We give Legislator of the Year awards. We have, recognize our champions, Governor of the Year, Federal Legislator of the Year, State Legislator of the Year. And then we do a fly-in in May also for our members. So our members come to D.C. We arrange all those visits with their members of the House or Senate, and take them around, shepherd those folks, and they get out. And we hit over 200 offices on Capitol Hill this year.
Wow.
I mean, that's a huge number. That's over half of Congress. So, yeah.
Well, if you're planning to go to the Safari Club International Convention in February, it's in Nashville. Great town. Probably one of the best conventions you're going to attend. Definitely come down, buy a ticket, show your support. I will also be there broadcasting live, so feel free to stop by, say hello, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done it already. And go to safariclub.org and join Safari Club International as well.
Right. I would say NRA is for guns. What the NRA is for guns, SCI is for hunting. So join SCI, make your voice heard, enter the fight.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today, and look forward to having you on again.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chris.
All right.